Election season. The time of year where everyone with a social media account suddenly becomes an expert on politics. And how fortunate we are that they all share their well-researched opinions unprompted and on full blast constantly. Social media, the place where nuanced discourse goes to die a horrible death. And I'm here to help desecrate its grave with a video on writing propaganda. Oh, don't worry, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. I'm here to tell you how to think. Am I covering propaganda in order to help people recognize when such techniques are being employed on them and thus be more prepared to resist deceitful manipulation? Of course not. I'm here to teach the valiant culture warriors that plague the comment sections of the internet how to more effectively lie and deceive others, as well as win their very high-stake arguments. Arguing with random people on the internet is the best and most constructive use of one's time, after all. So march with me, brave keyboard warriors, as terrible writing advice covers writing propaganda. Now, the first and most important thing to remember is that the opponent is always literally Hitler. The best propaganda technique is to go from zero to Godwin's law as fast as possible. Nothing beats the combo of reductio ad Hitlerum and literally misusing the word literally. Yes, this is a form of association fallacy, but you know who else accused others of association fallacies? Hitler. Remember on the internet, if X, then Nazis, no matter how tortured the logic is. Now, what if, for the sake of argument, the opponent is not literally Hitler on account of him being dead since the 40s? Does that mean I would have to actually address my opponent's arguments? Of course not. Time to break out the personal attacks and ad hominem them into the ground. Best start the argument off by calling the opponent stupid. Be sure to add some expletives as well to spice things up. The opponent can't have the high ground if I drag them down to wallow in the mud with me. Yes, my opponent's arguments will remain unaddressed, but no one will notice when we're both too busy slinging third-grade insults at one another. If one finds being nasty to the opponent just isn't their thing, then perhaps smug dismissal is a better option. Why ad hominem when instead we can ad botinum and dismiss one's opponent as a bot, corporate shill, and/or foreign agent? In no way will this make one look stupid when they continue to engage with the person they just labeled a bot. Now, my advice so far has been centered around attacking the opponent rather than their arguments. But what happens when the opponent manages to successfully thwart an argument? Well, what about this other evil thing that my opponent did, huh? Checkmate. Every keyboard warrior needs to install a Whataboutism escape hatch before they trudge through the depths of online discourse. Whataboutism works great because it turns the focus of the argument away from anything nuanced and instead drags it down into yet another personal attack. What happens if the opponent points out the whataboutism and tries to steer the argument back on course? Well, then grab the wheel and crash that argument back into the rocks with another personal attack. Oh no, my opponent has presented direct evidence that my argument is bad. Score 1 for the opposition. Or it would have if I didn't move that goalpost further out. This one's easy because eventually I can move that goalpost far enough that my opponent will never score a point. Score 1 for me. Remember, the burden of proof can be shifted as easily as that goalpost, and thus free the culture warrior to continue to make outrageous claims that their opponent cannot disprove because they don't operate on insane troll logic. What if one lacks evidence to support their claim? No worries, just say that the lack of evidence is evidence. It works for conspiracy theories. And if that doesn't cut it, then just tell them to Google it or provide links to sources that are just as neck-deep in Crazy Town. Now that we have thoroughly destroyed our foe with facts and logic, but most importantly personal attacks utterly devoid of intellectual merit, it's time to finish them off for good by eviscerating their argument for maximum ego gain. To accomplish this requires careful study of the enemy and their ideology to know the ins and outs of their belief system and perspective. But that requires I get out of my echo chamber circle jerk, so that's not going to happen. Instead, every culture warrior should become familiar with the strawman version of their opponent. Why come equipped with arguments that refute a foe's central thesis when we can instead be prepared to face a weakened shell of a foe that resembles nothing of the actual enemy I'm trying to fight? The best plans are ones that rely on the assumption that the enemy won't fight back. But what if the opponent uses a straw man argument? Should I refute this argument by pointing out how it's a gross simplification and highlight the use of the straw man fallacy? No, amateur mistake. The real way to counter a straw man argument is to become the straw man incarnate. Embrace every negative aspect of the opponent's characterization, all for the sake of owning them. No price is too steep for victory, especially in the race to the bottom. Yes, this can be done ironically, but inevitably the shift must be made to unironically embrace the worst aspects of the opponent's characterizations. If not, then don't worry. Eventually we will be awash in people who think they're in good company. Although our foe's argument now lies in smoldering ruins, a culture warrior still can't rest easy. It's not enough to simply crush my enemies, see them driven before me, and to read the lamentations in their comments. I am so insecure in my worldview that I require constant validation and reinforcement from others. Otherwise, who else will I share all these extremely funny and most definitely not overused memes with? We need to win everyone else to my side. The best way to convince people to jump aboard is to insist that everyone else already has. Climb on board the bandwagon fallacy. Yes, the bandwagon is probably getting ready to hurtle over a cliff, but I'll just leave out that part. There's no pressure quite like peer pressure. But what if my side isn't really part of the majority and is, in fact, widely loathed by pretty much everyone? Well, in that case, just pretend there is a silent majority who secretly supports my side. Yes, this is an act of willful delusion, but is probably preferable to having to share a crowded bandwagon. And let's be honest, there are way too many crowded bandwagons nowadays. How else can I sell my extremely bad ideas? The thing about selling ideas is that it must be properly branded. Like, for example, it's really easy to sell people eugenics when it isn't called that, and instead, ask them if they think stupid people shouldn't reproduce. Just rebrand. It's not genocide, it's a demographic reallocation initiative. It's not strategic bombing, it's peacekeeping, because there will be peace once there's nothing left but rubble. Did that still not work? Well, is there a rough analog in nature? If so, then just point that out. It's okay that I'm allowed to rip off senile old people because the strong preying on the weak is all natural. You know, like cancer and intestinal parasites. Appeals to nature are always great so long as no one thinks about how horrible nature is. If someone, though, sees through this and cites a specific example of why this is stupid, then it may be time to pivot away from the specific and to the broad and general. Enter the glittering generalities fallacy. My side isn't bad because my side supports freedom, honor, and common sense. Does that mean freedom to or freedom from? That's a big distinction. What constitutes as honor can be very subjective on the individual level and even more so culturally. Common sense tends to be a non-starter when used to try to find simple solutions for complex, multifaceted problems. But none of that matters because all those words have positive connotations, and anyone who opposes me also opposes freedom, honor, and common sense. Claiming to have common sense is extra useful because it can appeal to the common folk or plains folks fallacy. See, 2 fallacies for the price of 1. Just be sure to hide those luxury sports cars away before trying to convince people you're one of the plain folks. Now, if none of these are really moving people, then it may be time to break out the big lie. In other words, if I'm going to lie, I might as well lie big and lie often. The big lie works because of its audacity, and is even more effective when used in large enough quantities that it completely drowns out the truth. Don't forget to combine the big lie with scapegoating. This group of weak people with no power are the secret cause of everyone's problems in spite of having no power or ability to cause said problems. All we need now is to combine scapegoating and the big lie with the final ingredient in this ultimate propaganda cocktail: fear. Yes, good old-fashioned fear. Fear works so well when combined with scapegoating and the big lie because it creates an environment where people's emotions think for them. That is the point of propaganda, to rob people of their ability to think for themselves. For their own good, of course, but mostly for my good. Now, we could just not write propaganda, like a decent person would. Which is what a loser would say. Remember, the biggest mistake of writing propaganda is not falling for your own propaganda. Lies are super useful and have no drawbacks whatsoever. Why would anyone need accurate information in order to make informed decisions? You know what they say, garbage in, diamonds out. This makes it very useful to fall for your own lies, especially in the pursuit of unchecked power for power's sake. It's not like when the lies add up. When delusion can no longer support the weight of overwhelming inevitability, when it's too late for practicality to fix what ideology broke, there will be nothing left. Which is probably how much AdSense revenue I'll get for this video.